Hey, Mom Nation, and welcome back to another episode with Laura and I of Mental Wealth. Welcome, Laura.
Hello, hello.
Hello, I love these because, well, you know why, because you're here every single time. But for those of you who aren't here every single time, this show, Mental Wealth, is for you to get rid of that baggage, that luggage, really work on yourself so that you don't pass it down to your kids and then they pass it down to their kids. And it just becomes this thing we share that maybe, isn't so good.
Yeah. We don't need to share everything with them.
No, especially those things, right? Things
Yeah,
that do not serve them.
Things that do not serve. So we learn skills. We talk through different, even language to use when we're struggling. We go over all the things that can trigger us as moms and talk about, how to work through our stuff and how to keep ourselves calm, cool, and collected when life is chaotic and crazy and out of control. And so I love this. This is going to be a really good one today.
Same, yes. And that was such a great setup because when we think about this topic, I think about kind of crazy and out of control.
For sure. It can be really intense.
Yeah, and these days, as things are getting closer and closer, so guys, you saw the title, you saw the description, you know that we're talking about how to handle political discussions with your friends and family members and still like keep those relationships intact while respecting your own boundaries and your own belief systems as well. It's now more than ever, I'm seeing it everywhere. And of course, that's because we're getting really close to, the voting day and things are starting to get heated and heavy. And honestly, I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm sure that you are too. I'm sure our audience members are too. And we're likely experiencing these types of conversations in very intimate settings, like maybe, Sunday family dinner or we've got some holidays coming up. And although we'll be past the voting day once, the holiday season really kicks in, it'll still be pretty fresh. And I'd be willing to bet that there will be a conversation or two happening around that, Thanksgiving table or whatever it is you celebrate during those times.
Yeah, I think it gets really heated and it gets really touchy to have family members who disagree with one another about politics, and we're not always on the same page. We don't always have the same belief systems, and sometimes our belief systems change over time.
Yeah.
Like for example, in my 20s was registered as the opposite party that I'm registered as now.
Yeah.
And so I had really strong opinions about this one area of politics. And I had really strong opinions that I don't have anymore. And so if somebody's like, well, but you said, right. Or like, but you said this, or you thought this, or you used to say this, like those things can be triggering and upsetting to me where I'm like, but I don't believe that anymore. My opinion has changed. And so I can see how even when, it's about your own opinion being different than it was once, you still have a conflict when it's just one person involved.
Absolutely. It's interesting to hear you say that and for you to bring that up, because that's a conversation that I've had with a couple of family members during this election season, just asking them about the past. What were things like? So these are older family members. Like, what were things like, decades ago when XYZ was happening? And, tell me about that. And often I hear, well, I was registered as this party before, and now I'm this now. And it makes sense because with anything, we go through growth. We go through periods of learning, periods of experiencing more life, and taste change and values change and goals change, right? Like your goals now and the woman you are now are totally different than the woman you were in your early 20s, right? I mean, it only makes sense. So as we're moving through these seasons of our life, how can somebody, first question, how can somebody clearly identify what those beliefs and boundaries, or let's just go with beliefs, what those beliefs are, and feel confident in that, because it's really hard, especially with all the noise and the chatter and the pressure out there right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can have nuanced beliefs. Like that's the other thing is our system is polarized into two sort of distinct groups for the most part, right? Like there's other groups or whatever, but popular, like the most common is two different groups. So it's like you have this binary of like, well, you either are on this side or you're on that side. And I think one thing that's really important to know and to think through is that you don't have to be on one side or the other for everything. And there's nuances. Like things aren't as simple as one or the other. Things are not black and white. Things are not that easy. Things are not that simple. And so when you get into complex issues, you might say or feel like, on one hand, I can see this perspective and, I've always believed this, or I didn't know this, and this new information is kind of changing my mind. And, I don't know I'm not 100% in on this particular issue, but I'm maybe 80% in, and that's good enough for me. And I still have some questions, and I'm not, you don't have to be this like firm 100% at all or nothing. You can explore the gray area in there. And so not having this like 100% stance doesn't mean you don't know what you stand for.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that you don't know who you are. It just means that you can respect and appreciate that it's complicated.
I love that. And that gives me so much relief. And hopefully everybody out there kind of breathe this sigh of relief with that, because that takes some pressure off of it, right? Because I mean, not everything is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And so to say that we completely identify with absolutely everything that one side is versus the other side is kind of like, well, how,
Right.
So it only makes sense that we would allow ourselves that opportunity to explore and not maybe put so much pressure on ourselves to be 100% one or the other.
Yeah, I think we take the pressure off ourselves and we take the pressure off of other people. They don't have to agree with you in order to accept you, and you don't have to agree with them in order to accept them. Agreement and acceptance are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I think about issues and if somebody's discussing, well, what about this? What about this? Like, oh, those are good questions. Like I don't have to be like, well, that's stupid. You're an idiot. Or like, what are you thinking? Or you don't know anything. Like, I don't have to be combative. I can be like, okay, well, that's interesting. Like, what makes you think that? Or like, where did you learn that? And I think it gets hard today, and I'll say something a little controversial perhaps, but I don't think that we have a shared truth in terms of like facts and like where information is coming from and like what facts actually are. I think that maybe makes this a little extra complicated, right? So there can be somebody who doesn't believe in your source of fact. So you could say like, I believe this to be a fact. And someone else could say like, well, that's actually not a fact. Right. And so like, we're not even on the same page in terms of like what facts are.
The same info. Yeah. We're not working with the same stuff.
We're not working with the same stuff. And I think that makes it really hard to have any kind of, any kind of persuasion conversation. And so I think staying away from, we're not trying to necessarily persuade the other person to coming to our side or like believing what we believe. If we come from a place of being really curious, that was the first thing I thought of when we talked about this topic. Like we have to be curious and we can't be interested in persuasion. We have to drop the agenda.
Right. And I love that. Let's have a conversation without a reason or not necessarily a reason, but like you said, trying to make somebody else change their belief or agree with you when they may not.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially when you're talking to friends and family and you're not, at a speaking event. Like, okay, if you're at like some event or something and you're literally trying to persuade, like this is a different conversation.
Yeah.
We're talking about like intimate settings where you care and love the people that you're talking to, and you're not trying to alienate them, and you're not trying to dismiss them, and you're not trying to say like, I don't want to be in a relationship with this person because of their political views. We are trying to say, I'm curious about your ideas. And, I don't agree with everything that you're saying, but that's an interesting perspective, or I can understand how you got there with the information that you have. And, what you're, if I choose to believe a particular person or like a newscaster or something like that, right? Like I choose to believe a particular newscaster, and another person says like, well, that newscaster just lies. Right? I might say like, okay, well, I'm choosing to believe this person and I'm choosing to use these sources. That's where I'm getting my information. And that can be okay for me. I'm okay with that.
So using that example, and in that same intimate setting, so let's say it's, Sunday family dinner or whatever, it felt like you were kind of explaining boundaries in there. Can you make that a little more clear?
Yeah, I think boundaries is a good way to put it. When we're thinking about, okay, I believe this is my belief system, and I can appreciate your opinion. And that's really what we're saying is, I can appreciate your opinion, but I believe this way, and that doesn't make me stupid or wrong or bad. I'm not, the villain here. We don't have to agree. So even saying something like that, like voicing your opinion in that way, is kind of disarming, right? Like, hey, I'm not arguing with you. I don't want to change your mind. I'm just, this is my belief, and I appreciate your belief. I recognize that you have a different belief, and that's okay. And that's hard to do. It's hard to stay calm in those situations. Another thing that came to mind for me when we were looking at this topic is like alcohol consumption.
Oh, yes.
So like, my advice is that if we're having drinks, probably just don't talk about politics at all, because we don't have the same sense of grounding, and we don't have the same ability to remain calm. We don't have like our breaks.
Right.
So
the filter, and
we don't have a filter. We don't have the breaks. We can get really riled up. We can get really passionate. We're not thinking as clearly. We're sort of just saying without necessarily considering the other person's point of view. And so I think adding alcohol to a political conversation is probably not a great idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can just make that a rule.
I think we should make that a rule. Isn't it the unspoken rule? Isn't there 3 things that you don't talk about when you're at a bar?
Yeah, I think it's religion and politics, and I don't know the third, but
there's another.
Those are my top 2.
Absolutely. And with good reason. So what kind of language, and you kind of got into it just a little bit, so I'm asking you to repeat just a little bit, but maybe embellish or enhance a bit on this. But what kind of language could we use with another person to respect their boundaries when we might disagree, so that it's not like igniting language? It's, it doesn't light the fire.
Yeah. I think we can say things like, I hear you. I understand your opinion. I respect your opinion. I respect you. I understand that that's how you feel. I appreciate you sharing that with me. Things that are igniting would be like you statements, like, well, you're wrong. You're doing this. Like, you always say this, avoiding saying always and never is important. Like, I think that we want to be able to have a disagreement, and we want to be able to say like, I believe this way, but that's not my identity necessarily. Right. So like, we are not our beliefs. We are a more dynamic person than the things that we believe, especially our political beliefs.
Right.
One of the reasons why we don't talk about religion and politics is because those things are wrapped up in our identities. Like, a lot of the time, these beliefs are sort of intertwined with who we believe we are as a person. And it's not easy to separate that. Like, it's not easy to say, okay, well, I believe this thing and you believe this thing, like, and we can still love each other and connect and get along. I think that's a hard thing to do. And when someone attacks or challenges your beliefs about these things, that can feel like they're challenging who you are as a human being. And so we want to separate ourselves from the content and recognize, like, we're just having a conversation. So we might be able to say something like, hey, I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm not trying to change anything about you. I love you the way that you are. And, these are some of the things that I think about when I think about this topic. And these are some of the things that are important to me, and what's important to you. How do you feel about that? How did you learn that? Where did you come up with those ideas? And how did you come to that particular belief and conclusion? Those are just probing questions. And if we don't want to know, we don't have to ask. I think some people are less passionate than other people. And so for like about this, not just in general, but like specifically about politics or religion or whatever, like if I don't have a specific passion for it, it's maybe easier for me to be like, oh, okay, like I see your point, like whatever, I don't care.
Right.
Like I was having a conversation with a friend the other day and she was saying, she's not that involved in politics. And she was just asking me questions, right? She's like, hey, what about these policies? Like I keep hearing about taxes or I keep hearing about the border. Like, what do you know about it? And I was like, well, this is my understanding of what's going on. Right. And we're just having a conversation. She's not like, oh, well, that's dumb. Or, I'm not like, well, how could you not know? Or we're just having a conversation and saying like, this is my understanding. I heard this from this place. What did you hear? Where did you hear it from? Did you watch this or did you see this or whatever? We're coming from a place of curiosity and kindness, and we're just asking questions and we're relating information. Like, this is my understanding, period. Right.
I love that information sharing.
Yeah. Information.
Right. And I love how you mentioned, because some people do respond that way when you just share information that you've seen or heard or, read about, whatever it is. And some people do respond in that negative way. And I always wonder what emotionally triggered, there's an obvious emotional trigger there.
Totally.
What is it? And maybe that's a weird question for you to answer because, people are people and they're very different. But
sure. But no, I think I know the answer. I think I know the answer. I could be wrong, but when we talk about religion and politics, we're talking about our personal identity. And we're talking about things that are super deeply rooted into who we think we are. And so when someone challenges or questions those beliefs, we take that personally. We take that from the perspective of like, well, you're saying I don't know. You're saying I'm bad, right? Like if I'm saying the other party is like a mess or they're monsters or they're this or they're right, because that's the kind of language people use.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like they're ruining the world. They're ruining the country. They're damaging our whatever, right?
It's very alarming, actually, the words that get used.
Yeah, it's high energy. It's emergent. It's like the sense of urgency, that we have around these things. And so it's like, if I believe this, you're attacking me. You're attacking me as a human. You're not just saying my beliefs are bad. You're saying I'm bad. And so I think that's why people get so fired up, because these are not just questions of like, what'd you do on Tuesday? You know what I mean? Like, these are questions of like, our values and our morals and who we are in our life, right? Because a lot of the issues that are like hot button issues come back to morals and values. And, it's probably easier to talk about an issue like the economy than it is to talk about an issue like immigration or, an issue of like education. Like those are complex issues that people have really deeply rooted values and moral judgments on. And so they maybe are a little bit more triggering and hot button than, when we talk about like tax cuts.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how can we I feel like it's important to take that step back and sort of recognize our emotional triggers and recognize like when we see something like, what is it about that post that we saw, or what is it about what that family member said that is affecting us? Can you say more on that? Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Like if somebody, if I'm triggered by a post, which I get triggered by posts, right? I have emotions too. And so I'll read stuff sometimes and I'll be like, oh, like this, like I have like a visceral reaction to certain things that I see. And it's like, okay, why am I reacting that way? Well, because it cuts into my values. It cuts into like how I want to raise my kids. It cuts into how I want to teach my kids. And if there are competing, so this is the other thing. If the world and the country supports something that goes against what I believe to be right and true, then it makes it hard for me to have credibility with my children when I'm teaching them what's right and true, if there's a disagreement with like society. Right?
Gotcha.
So
Ooh,
that's
that's
why we
deep.
seek to control society. We want to control the narrative. We want to control because we want to teach our kids from a certain perspective. And so if what I believe is right and true, that's what I want my kids to believe is right and true. But if there's all this language out there saying, well, that's not right and true, this other thing is, then I don't have as much credibility with my own family. And I'm losing control and I'm losing power. And that's a threat. And that's hard.
Yeah. That never occurred to me. And it makes so much sense now that you've said it. Yeah. I mean, that's huge. That's giant. And, it blows my mind, or used to, now that we've had this conversation, my eyes have been open a little bit more, but to see strangers reacting to strangers literally about people that don't even know their name, let's face it, candidates don't even know who we are, and it can get really toxic really quick. And so I'd always look at it and be like, how does that get from here to there? But that makes a lot of sense, a real lot of sense. And it's stressful. And what does stress do to people,
Yeah. And I think the only answer is that we don't have control. The only solution is to accept that the world is a complex place. And we can teach our kids the world is a complex place. But our family values XYZ. And those are the things that are important to me. And so those are the things that I'm trying to instill in you. And then we have to accept what's even harder to accept, which is that our children are independent and can have differing views than us. And that's not easy. So how many of us have differing political views than our parents? Yeah. So when we have differing political views than our parents, like think about that as a parent of a young child, right? As a parent of a young child, you want to control their thoughts. You want to control their narrative, what they believe in, what they think is true. We're controlling that. But they can grow up and totally believe the opposite. And so if that happens, then what, right? Like we have to accept that we can't control other people and that they're going to believe what they believe. My sons and they're older now. And so we've had some political conversations, and their dad and I have different views. And so they're hearing one thing from him and one thing from me. And one thing that I say a lot is like, I can respect everybody's viewpoint and recognize like that makes sense that he would think that way. This makes sense the way I think, right? Like based on our personalities, based on our values, based on how we interact with the world. Those are the ways that we see things. Like this is my worldview. This is his worldview. This is what's your worldview?
I like that question. Like, yeah, I think this way, Dad thinks that way. What do you think?
Yeah. What do you think? And where are you getting your information? That's a great question. Like, where do you go for sources? Where do you go for your news? Right? How do you know if it's true? What makes you believe something's true versus not true? Right? Like, those are questions that everybody can answer. Like, well, I believe this is true because I saw it in 5 sources. Okay, that's valid, right? Like, we all had to write research papers in school, and we had to find evidence to support our claims, right? So we all know how to do that. And when we are inquiring and we're saying, like, where do you get your information and how do you know it's true? And, this is where I get mine. And these are kinds of some of the things that I think about. Like, I'm not sure if this is true until I look at different sources, and then I look at sources with opposite political views, because, sources can have their own political biases, right?
Absolutely.
And so I try to find from both sides. Like, so I try to read something from, another perspective, and I kind of see if it meets in the middle somewhere to make a narrative that makes sense. Because a lot of the time it's not one or the other. It is somewhere in the middle,
right?
Is the truth.
I would say probably most of the time. And I love that advice of, doing a well-rounded, kind of being well-rounded in your research and, what you read and what you consume. And, another thing too, and this is the last thing, it's kind of off topic and I want to bring us back to the parent-child thing. But I also think that it's important to listen to those people speak themselves, because we have the opportunity to do that, right? Versus just always looking at headlines too, because sometimes that can skew us a bit.
No, I think that's a great point. Like, from them, what did they say? Right. And in what context?
Right.
Did they say it? Yeah. And, going back to where we find our information and like how we know something is true or what we have our opinions on, like, it's also okay to say, I don't know enough about that to like really have a well-formed opinion. Like, what do you think?
Yeah.
Like, I think when I was having a conversation with my friend, that was one of the things. She asked me a question. I said, you know what? I don't know enough about that. Right. And so I can't really say for sure where I land on it. But I'm curious, like, what made you ask? Like, where did you hear about it? Or, what did you hear? What are your thoughts on it? It's okay to just not really know and be open to that. Like, own that you don't have to know everything about everything, and you can still vote. You can still have, a stance without having 100% of the information too. You don't have to be an encyclopedia.
Exactly. And you're still smart and your opinion is still valid and it still matters. And I love that you said that, because I think sometimes we can get lost in that. Well, I'm not a total expert on this, so does my opinion really matter? And yeah, it sure does. Yeah. Because it takes all kinds, really. I do want to go back to the child-parent dynamic and having the different belief system. And share a post that I saw. I wasn't in Mom Nation, I don't think. I think it was in another group. And this poor mama, she was an anonymous mama, and she was saying, my dad and I disagree politically, and like basically he's cutting me out kind of thing. Like, it's we don't have a relationship right now, or the relationship has drastically changed. And it sounded like maybe they weren't, communicating or getting together and that kind of thing. And she sounded kind of sad about it. And she was receiving some pressure from family members, siblings, to just shut her mouth and make it good and say what he wants to hear kind of thing. And that's obviously got to be a really tough spot to be in, because you certainly don't want to compromise yourself, especially as an adult, right? Like, we made it here. And we need to respect ourselves in this space. But what kind of things, if somebody were to find themselves in that spot, what kind of things can they do for themselves to help personally ground? And you know what I'm saying? Like personally help them be okay with the situation, even if maybe the situation isn't okay.
You know, the first thing that came to mind was the serenity prayer.
Yeah.
You know, grant me the ability to like let go of things I cannot change and change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Right. I think I'm getting that right. Maybe.
Yeah.
But I think that's really key here. We cannot control other people.
Right.
If someone else doesn't respect our boundaries, we don't have to interact with them anymore. That's a choice. We can say, hey, you know, I want to have a relationship with you and I want to be, you know, around you. But, you know, the way that you talk to me about this stuff, and, you know, maybe you're name calling, maybe you're pushy, maybe you're whatever. I don't know what they're doing, but whatever they're doing that's violating the boundary, other than just like sharing their opinions, because like we have opinions are opinions, like let those go.
Right.
But if it's something where you're like being personally attacked, like you can say like, it's not okay for you to talk to me that way. And if you're going to talk to me that way, I have to remove myself from this situation. And if we want to have a relationship with people who have different opinions than us, they have to respect our boundaries and we have to respect theirs. And so they have these beliefs like, okay, I accept you as a whole person who is more than just what you believe about this topic. And so I have to accept you as a person and recognize that, like, that is what you believe. That is just how you are. And you believe these things. Now, if you're imposing those values on me by telling me that, you know, I'm by name calling or by belittling me or, you know, by saying like really, you know, offensive things that are unacceptable to me, like, then I need to make a decision about that. You know, like, I'm in an interracial relationship. If my beliefs were so different than my parents and my parents didn't accept that, right, then I would, which isn't the case, but just saying, this is a thing that can happen. If they are not going to be respectful to my partner because of their race, then I can say to them, like, then we're not going to come around because that's not okay. Right? Like that boundary, that's my boundary. You have respect for this person, right? If they won't, then I have to say, like, then I can't bring this person around, and this person is the priority in my life. And like, we have to be, you know, we have to set our boundary as in our relationship. Like, and it's really hard. And if we can talk that out and say, like, why is it so important for you to, you know, say these things when I'm here? Why do you have to say that when I'm here? Why not just not talk about that when I'm here? Why not just not say those things and accept me for who I am?
Because it's okay, right? It's okay to just be like, hey, topic off limits. Okay.
Right. You know, we can negotiate those terms of the relationship. And it's complicated and it's not always comfortable, but that's okay. We don't have to, it's not an all or nothing world.
Right. And then within ourselves, because that can be really jarring, right? Especially if it's your parent that you've had, say, great long relationship with, maybe not so great if they're going to cut you out over that. But let's just say it was a relationship you enjoyed, you know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of jarring to have it change abruptly based on something like that. What are some things that we can do personally to be okay with it? To accept that, because like you mentioned, it's hard to accept sometimes in situations like that.
Yeah, we have to recognize that people are just people. And we have to say, like, I see that this person has a different belief system than me, and that it's not healthy for us to stay, in touch right now, or communicate as much as we used to, or any of the things. We have to justify that within ourselves. We have to say, like, I'm okay still. I can be okay even if this relationship is damaged. I can be okay even if I'm not able to have these same contacts. I can be okay because I have value. My opinion matters. My belief is important. I'm somebody who is capable of living a fulfilled life and a healthy life and setting boundaries for myself and standing up for myself and having self-respect. And I deserve that. I deserve to respect myself.
And I am right there with all of that. I'm just thinking of how difficult of a transition that is for a child coming from child, where parent basically controls what I believe and think, growing into my adult self and getting out of that habit.
Yeah. I say to people all the time, like, parents are just people. They're just random people that happen to be your parent. But otherwise, like, they're just random people, right?
Right.
They could be anybody. They happen to be your parent, but, like, that doesn't make what they say any more valuable than what another person says, right? Like, a stranger versus, like, a parent, the only difference is that they are your parent. But, like, otherwise, they're just a set of random people in the world that have their beliefs that they grew up with, that they built on their own. And you can have yours that are separate. You can have a separate identity from your parents and still have a relationship with them, or you can choose not to have a relationship if it's no longer healthy and it's not serving you. They're just random people.
And I think, like, it makes sense. And I don't think we are the only people on the planet that have changed our beliefs from what our parents' beliefs might be. They grew up in a different time. They had different circumstances. There were different just things that they had to deal with or didn't have to deal with. Right? So I guess we're talking about me here, because I'm like, Katie, why are you hanging on this subject? I personally have a hard time.
Yeah.
Like, not, because I have one parent that I agree with more than the other one in this. And I'm just like, I personally feel almost bad. Like, it's almost a betrayal. Is that so weird?
Yeah. No, it doesn't sound weird.
To think differently and to, not because I'm not smart, but just to stand that ground kind of in opposition almost, I feel like. And it's just a strange spot for me to be in.
Yeah, that's childhood stuff, right? So that's a child's perspective, is that we have to agree with our parent, because if we don't agree with them, they won't love us anymore. And if they don't love us anymore, then we'll probably die.
Probably.
And you are not going to die if you disagree with your parents. You are not going to lose everything. You will not be alone forever. You are not being abandoned. As an adult, you can't be abandoned. Differing beliefs are differing beliefs. And we can say, I can appreciate all of these things about you and disagree with you on this thing. And as long as we agree that we're not going to impose our values on each other in the area, then we can be great friends.
I love, and I marked it, but I love what you said about you can't be abandoned. That's heavy right there. You really think about that. No, you can't. Not at this point.
No, because you're independent. You are not dependent on that adult. You are that adult that is dependent on yourself.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
We had a little sesh right there.
That's great. I think it's really important to take these things, like, and really think about them, right? Like, when we're disagreeing, when we have these fundamental, deep, rifts in our experience, in our beliefs with family members, it's really, really hard. And we're talking about politics in this particular, the content here is politics, but the content of any of this could be something else. It could be the way you raise your kids. It could be the way, like, your religion. It could be your relationship. It could be like
your job.
It could be your job. Insert topic here.
Right.
It could be anything that causes these rifts. But when we can say, like, hey, I respect you and I appreciate you as a whole person, and I respect that you're an independent person who doesn't have to make the same choices I would make.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to believe the same things I would believe. And we can still be great friends as long as we agree not to impose our values on one another.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to impose my values on you. I'm not going to make you believe what I believe. I'm not going to tell you that you're bad if you don't believe what I believe, because that is imposing values and we don't need to do that.
Mm-hmm. Whew, heavy topic.
It is a heavy topic.
It is. And again, like I mentioned in the beginning, I just feel like, and maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just seeing it absolutely everywhere, but I'm seeing, and it's mostly on social media, a few in-person conversations here and there, but I'm just seeing a lot of relationships being broken.
Yeah.
Because of this. And yeah, okay, so it happens, between strangers, that's whatever. But when I see it, like that post that I saw with the dad and the daughter, I'm seeing friends that are cutting ties with each other just because somebody said something about, again, people that don't even know our names, people that we don't even know. I mean, and we can talk about what their real impact actually is. You know what I mean? Because that can be up for discussion too. It just is really sad to me. And I thought that it would be a good thing to just put out on the table and kind of chat about in case. And I'm sure that some of our members, if not all, are affected by this at varying degrees, right? And so I was hoping that it might be a conversation that would be helpful with getting through the next couple of months, because we all got to get through them.
Yeah. We have to respect ourselves and we have to respect others, and knowing that, separate ourselves from the content. So when someone has a belief that is different than yours and it's offensive to you, separate that person from the content. Like, they are more than just that one thought. They're a full dynamic person, more than just that one thought. And separate yourself from the content, meaning you are more than just what you believe about this thing. And they're attacking the belief. They're not attacking you. They're challenging the belief. They're not challenging you. And so that goes both ways. So when you're in the conversation, you're challenging their belief. You're not challenging them. And when we separate that and just say, like, this is just information, it's just data,
right,
then it's a lot less powerful.
I love that. It's just data. We're the ones that assign the emotion to it.
Right.
I think we need to keep that in mind a lot more often, right?
I think so too. Yeah. Because that goes for everything.
Everything. Even, I mean, have you ever done this? You get a text message from somebody and you're in like a really pissy mood, like, for whatever reason, and you totally read it wrong and you're like Medusa when you respond. I might have just dated myself. Do you even know who that is? Okay, good. But right, like, we could interpret data in a very different way depending on how we're doing that day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, grounding yourself, like you had mentioned before, like staying in your true self, staying present, recognizing your own internal sense of safety, recognizing your own internal sense of calm. Like, I visualize a calm place in my mind when I need to, when I'm feeling overwhelmed. I take a breath and breathe in with my belly. And then I breathe out. I know, I just did it too. I can't not do it when I think about it. But I, take a walk. I look at the ground underneath my feet. I tap my feet on the ground a couple of times and say, like, I'm just standing here. I'm just in my office. I'm just doing this one thing. I'm recording the pod right now. I'm, having a snack right now. I'm whatever. I'm just doing that, and I'm focusing on just doing that, and I can focus my attention on being grounded and stable and calm. The more often I do that, the better I'll receive information, and the better I'll be able to react to it.
I love that. We've talked about before that it's okay to leave. So let's just say this is a conversation and you're in front of somebody, right? And you're starting to feel the fire. It's okay to leave a conversation and be like, I'm gonna come back after I've had an opportunity to like go take a walk around the block or go look at nature for a moment and go ground yourself.
Yeah.
And I've been in situations where I've done that and people have done that with me. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then, things, you tend to get more done after that. Yeah. You tend to get, goal accomplished versus more of a mess than what you began with. But I feel like a lot of times we don't keep that in mind, that we can leave a conversation. Not everything deserves a response or needs a response right away.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's okay to say, can we push pause on this? I need to take a breath.
Yeah.
Can we push pause? I need to take a minute from this conversation. I'm getting a little overwhelmed. And I guess that feels vulnerable.
Yeah.
But sometimes we have to be vulnerable in order to not overreact.
And would you rather be vulnerable, or would you rather be like really sorry and really feeling bad about the whole interaction later on? Like,
yeah, I think that's a good question to ask oneself during those situations.
Yeah. Do you want to have remorse or be a little human for a minute?
Yeah, because that's okay. It's okay to say like, okay, I need a minute. I need to push pause. I need to take a break from this conversation for just a second, because I'm getting overwhelmed, or like I feel like I might not I notice myself starting to respond in a way that isn't consistent with my goals. My actions are inconsistent with my goals. I need to take a break. My words are inconsistent with like my intent. I need to take a break. Like that's okay. Sometimes we need to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like I always do, I feel like we can continue the rest, like this conversation for the rest of the afternoon,
I know, right?
Because I kind of have a lot more to say. But I feel like it's really for another show. I've taken some notes and things here that I think great content for a whole other show.
Okay.
Anything else about the political conversation, again, like between family, friends, trying to just keep relationships, good and positive and healthy, but still respecting your beliefs, your boundaries during this really heavy atmosphere that we're in right now?
Yeah. I want to say to listen like you don't have anything to lose. Like, listen to the answers to the questions and really be curious and recognize that their opinion doesn't cancel out yours. It's not a zero-sum game. You don't have anything to lose.
I love that. That hits.
Yeah. You don't have anything to lose.
And I think that gives the opportunity for more listening to happen, which makes more understanding, right? Versus, well, while you're talking, I'm just thinking about what I'm going to say in response to that, or I'm just thinking about what I'm going to say to combat that, or to fact check that or prove that wrong, or whatever it is. That feels so aggressive and not conducive to an exchange of valuable information, which I think most of us ultimately really want. When we're conversing with another, I don't seek out, having a fight with somebody. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I want to have a valuable exchange of information with them. That's why I talk to people.
Right. Right. We want to learn. We want to hear. It's not taking anything away from me to recognize that you have an opinion that's different than mine.
Right.
Yeah. That's
And
my
we can
last
learn
word
from
on
each
that.
other too.
Yeah. We can learn from each other. We can be curious and be open and maybe come away with a different perspective. Like more nuanced perspective is always a good thing.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Crazy thing that we have to deal with as humans.
I know. And I wish that we could be better at getting along with each other when we differ in our opinions, right? Like, I would like to see that happen over the future. Like, we can disagree with more grace and more compassion and more space for one another. I think that would be really great.
Yeah. I love that. I love what you said about just because I disagree with you doesn't mean that I, what was it? You said it so perfectly that I don't accept you, I think is what you
Yeah.
said.
I
Yeah.
can accept you as a whole person and still disagree with one part of what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. That's important. And you know what?
Yeah.
I don't want to be the same as anybody anyway. How boring.
You're right. That would be boring. If we only surround ourselves with people who have the same views as us, we never learn anything.
Right. And that just kind of like defeats the whole purpose of
Lame.
growth and
Yeah.
collaboration and all of that.
Yeah. Growth is hard. It's worth it.
Totally. Best quote ever. I marked that one. All right, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's always such a pleasure. And I feel like we're just sitting in the living room, Well, look, I actually am.
We are.
We are. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do it?
They can find me online at www.benavieri.com, Benavieri. That's where all my socials are, at Benavieri as well.
Awesome. And you guys, if you want to check out any of our previous episodes, I post these episodes all the time. I don't know if you see me out there in social media land, but
yes.
I don't know if my Facebook just like shows me the perfect posts for our videos are the answer. And I just love it. So I share them a lot and they seem to be very, very relevant. All of our topics seem to be very relevant with what's trending out there that I'm seeing. And really, we've been doing this for a couple of years now. So for those of you out there that maybe have just joined us that aren't familiar, and you want to check out more, then hop on over to our YouTube channel. It is at Mom Nation USA. That is our handle. Scroll down just a little bit and you will see the yellow playlist, and that is the mental wealth playlist. All of our videos are in there. Did you know that, I don't know if it's all podcast platforms now, but I'm starting to see videos pop up on podcast platforms.
Ooh, cool.
And I was able to upload a video this time around. So I'm really excited that this video will be presented with the audio version on your favorite podcast platform. Just do a quick search for Mom Nation Talk Radio. There you will find us. And now we are in video version.
Awesome. That's so cool.
Right? Pretty rad. So, all right, guys, until next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.